Have you noticed it? Every time tension rises, whether it's China, Russia, or the Middle East, your phone buzzes with headlines. Markets crash, retirees are doomed, your nest egg will vanish. And just like that, your gut tightens, your 401k dashboard becomes a horror show, and you wonder if retiring in your 60s is even safe. But here's the truth, the one they don't scream on CNBC or your favorite news channel. Wars don't kill retirements. People do, by panicking, selling at the bottom, or abandoning their plan. Let me take you on a journey back in time to moments when the headlines screamed doom, but history laughed at the fear. And if you're watching this at home right now, hit that subscribe button for Darek Invests, because if you want to survive and actually thrive during crises, you're going to need the insight nobody else dares to give. December 1941, Pearl Harbor, America enters World War II. Economists, advisors, and every financial columnist would have told you that retirees in 1942 were doomed. If you had $100,000 saved with a standard 4% withdrawal, your portfolio was toast. But check this, by 1952, that portfolio didn't just survive, it grew. It grew because wartime production skyrocketed. Factories were humming 24/7. Unemployment hit almost zero. Corporate profits were through the roof, and the government issued war bonds that were rock solid. Your dollars weren't disappearing, they were being amplified by the engine of war-driven productivity. And the lesson here is brutal. Fear-driven assumptions about war almost always exaggerate the risk to your retirement. But what about those long wars like Vietnam? From 1965 to 1975, the U.S. endured political chaos, social unrest, and a confusing economic backdrop. Yet, a retiree with a balanced portfolio and a disciplined 4% withdrawal rate could have survived all the way into the 1980s. Fast forward to 1990, the Gulf War. Market panic hit, S&P dropped 17% in 3 months, but anyone who didn't panic, they enjoyed average annual returns of 18% for the rest of the decade. Here's the brutal, simple truth. Wars themselves don't kill your retirement. Selling at the bottom, reacting emotionally, or abandoning your plan kills it. And let's be real, who hasn't almost panicked? I remember my uncle in 1990. He called me in a frenzy. "Darek, sell everything. The world's ending." I laughed and told him, if you sell now, the market will personally thank you by taking your money. Guess who's retired comfortably now and who's still chasing the market highs? Now, there is one type of war that actually can destroy retirements. And it's not overseas bombs. It's economic warfare. Think late 1970s to early 80s. Inflation hit 13.5%. The Fed responded by hiking interest rates to nearly 20%. Retirees? Their cost of living doubled almost overnight. Stocks? Flat. Bonds? Almost worthless. And why is this worse than a regular war? Because you can't diversify away from interest rate spikes, inflation, and aggressive monetary policy. You can't hide under a mattress. And unlike a normal war, you can't ride the government's industrial output to grow your portfolio. This proves that the quiet financial wars are far more dangerous than headline-grabbing global conflicts. So, what can you do today if the headlines are screaming and the markets are jittery? History gives us 4 things all survivors share. Diversification. Stocks, bonds, commodities, and cash. They perform differently under pressure. Cash reserves. 1 to 2 years of expenses in cash. Don't be forced to sell during a market drop. Inflation protection. Tips, commodities, and other hedges. They shield you when prices spike during conflicts. Discipline. Stay invested. Every major conflict in modern history was followed by a recovery. Here's a story. My friend Sarah, a retiree in 2003, faced Iraq War market drops. While her neighbors panicked and sold, she kept her allocation, reinvested dividends, and by 2010, her portfolio had doubled. Meanwhile, those who listened to the news barely caught up. Another point, your family and mental health are tied directly to this. Panicking affects relationships. I've seen couples argue over market fear more than any mortgage or car payment. But keeping your plan disciplined, you're not just protecting wealth, you're protecting your marriage, your peace, your freedom. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe to Darek Invests. Trust me, you'll want to see this advice before the next headline panic hits your inbox. Retirements that failed during wartime didn't fail because of bad luck. They failed because of fear-driven financial decisions. You cannot predict wars, but you can control your response. Keep your emotions in check. Focus on long-term growth, not headlines. Prepare your portfolio to survive anything. This isn't theory, this is proven history. From Pearl Harbor to Vietnam to the Gulf War, the people who stayed the course thrived. The ones who panicked, they lost decades of potential wealth.
Now, let's really think about this. Imagine a couple, like the Thompsons, who retired in 1965. They faced the Vietnam War market drop, political upheaval, and skyrocketing living costs. They had $250,000 saved. Not a fortune by today's standards, but decent. Instead of panicking when the markets dipped 20%, they held steady. They increased their contributions slightly during the downturn, took advantage of tax breaks, and reinvested dividends. By the late 1970s, their portfolio was not just surviving, it had outpaced inflation and allowed them to travel, help their kids with college, and even start a small business they always dreamed of. Now, imagine the same couple if they had panicked, sold their investments, or pulled everything into cash. That small market dip would have cost them tens of thousands, possibly hundreds over decades. Fear is expensive, financially and emotionally. Here's another story closer to home. My client James, a former engineer, watched the news in 2003 during the Iraq War. He panicked at first, called me voice shaking, "Derek, the world is ending, should I sell?" I told him, "James, the world will still be here in 10 years. Your portfolio is a time machine, not a panic button." He stayed disciplined. By 2013, his portfolio had more than doubled. And you know the funny part? He now tells his grandchildren the story of how he almost lost a decade of wealth because he listened to the news instead of his plan. Here's the psychology behind it. Our brains are wired for immediate threat, not long-term growth. When the TV flashes "war," your amygdala kicks in. It screams, "Run, protect your nest egg." But that's exactly the reaction that destroys wealth. The people who succeed, historically and today, train themselves to override that panic, to trust history, and to trust discipline. Now, let's talk practical steps you can implement tonight, even if the headlines scream. Reassess your asset allocation. Make sure your portfolio isn't overweight in one volatile sector. Boost your cash reserves, even if it's just a few thousand more dollars. Peace of mind counts as much as growth. Check your insurance and retirement withdrawals. Know exactly how much you can safely pull without risking penalties or taxes. Document your plan. Write it down. Seeing the numbers on paper makes fear less persuasive than facts. And here's the real kicker. This isn't just about money. Your financial discipline shapes your family's mental health, your relationships, and your freedom. When a spouse panics and wants to sell everything, when a teenager asks for money for college, when health scares happen, if your financial foundation is disciplined, you control the narrative. If it's shaky, fear controls it. If you've watched this far, you already know that fear is temporary, but disciplined planning lasts a lifetime. So take a deep breath, step away from the panic headlines, and start building a portfolio that doesn't care whether the world is at war or peace. And here's your reminder, one you won't want to forget. Hit that subscribe button for Darek Invests. Turn on notifications. If a war breaks out, a recession hits, or a headline screams doom tomorrow, you'll be prepared with knowledge, not panic. Remember, history favors the disciplined, the patient, the ones who stay in the game. Wars, crises, political chaos, they aren't enemies. The reactions to them are. Be smart, be prepared, and yes, be rebellious with your wealth.